Thank you, Mr. Sekhalwe. Our Deputy Public Protector in his absentia is in Mpumalanga. We've got, as they've introduced the panel, and thank you so much for joining the Public Protector South Africa when we issue the report today. I reveal my findings and appropriate remedial action that I have taken following the investigation into allegations of the violation of the Executive Ethics Code by the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa. This is in relation to the alleged improper relationship with African Global Operations, a company previously known as Bosasa. I think I will just refer to the company as AGO as I go along. At the outset, I would like to thank the President for the dignified manner with which he conducted himself during the course of this investigation. The respect he accorded my office from the moment I informed him on the complaints against him up to this point has been exemplary. It is my belief that the President conducted himself in that manner because he understood that he is not above scrutiny. Leading by example, the President, during the course of the investigation, fully embraced the principles establishing and governing the Public Protector. Included among those principles is that this office is independent, subject only to the Constitution and the law, and must be impartial and exercise its powers without fear or favor and prejudice. The office must also be assisted and protected to ensure its independence, impartiality, dignity, and effectiveness. Further, no person or organ of state may interfere with the office's functioning. So I'll go to the complaint. On the 23rd of November 2018, I received a complaint from Mr. Mmusi Maimane, the leader of the official opposition party, against the President, alleging that the President has violated the Executive Code of Ethics. And in his complaint, Mr. Maimane alleged that on 18 October 2017, an amount of 500,000 rands was paid into a bank account referred to as EFG2, which is said to be a trust foundation account of the son of the President, Mr. Ramaphosa, son Mr. Andile Ramaphosa. He stated that the money in question was paid from a personal account of Mr. Gavin Watson, the Chief Executive Officer of AGO, into the account of Mioto Trading, a company closely associated with Bosasa before being paid to FG2 bank account. Can I just pause so that we can fix the microphone? Thank you. So he stated that the money in question was paid from a personal account of Gavin Watson, the CEO of AGO, into the account of Mioto Trading, a company closely associated with Bosasa. And that money was then paid into EFG2 bank account. Mr. Maimane also alleged that on 6th November 2018, during a question session in Parliament, President Ramaphosa violated the Executive Members' Ethics Code by deliberately misleading the National Assembly in his reply to a question he had posed. The question concerned related to the proof of payment he was in possession of, indicating that the transfer of funds into a trust account called EFG2 on 18 October, allegedly for Mr. Andile Ramaphosa, was paid. And during a question, Mr. Maimane further indicated that he was in possession of a sworn affidavit from a certain Mr. Piet Venter, stating that he had been asked by the CEO of Bosasa to make the transfer for Mr. Andile Ramaphosa. He asked the President to take the nation into his confidence regarding the transfer or the transaction concerned. According to Mr. Maimane, the President stated in his response that he was aware of the transaction and that he had asked his son, whom he said runs a financial consultancy business, about it. The President, according to Mr. Maimane, also indicated that among the companies his son consulted for was Bosasa. He stated that he had asked his son about the funds in question, and his son had told him the funds were payment of services rendered, and went as far as showing the President a copy of a contract signed with Bosasa. The contract dealt with issues of integrity, issues of anti-corruption, and so forth. Mr. Maimane stated that the President indicated added further, amid interjections and applause, that his son ran an honest business, and going as far as to assure him that in the event it turned out that his son was involved in illegal activities or corruption, the President will be the first person to report the son to the authorities. In a detailed letter with annexed extracts from Hansard, the official record of the debates in Parliament, Mr. Maimane further alleged that subsequent to the alleged transaction, the President sent a letter. In fact, to the response, the President sent a letter to the Speaker of the National Assembly, purporting to correct the answer he had given to the National Assembly. According to Mr. Maimane, in this letter, the President revealed that the payment in question was actually a donation towards his campaign to be elected the President of the governing party in December 2017, which was called the CR17 campaign. In addition, Mr. Maimane stated that it was his concern that an improper relationship possibly existed between President Ramaphosa and his family on the one side and the company AGO on the other. According to him, the nature of the payment passing through several intermediaries did not accord with a straightforward donation and raised suspicion of money laundering. The alleged donor was, in Mr. Maimane's words, further widely reported to have received billions of rands in state tenders, often in irregular fashion. Not long after receiving Mr. Maimane's complaints on 29 January 2019, my office received a further complaint from Mr. Floyd Shivambu, the Deputy President and Chief Whip of the EFF. He also alleged that the President had violated the Executive Code of Ethics, and Mr. Shivambu charged that during the President's appearance in the National Assembly on the 6th of November 2018, he said his son's company had a contract with AGO for the provision of consultancy services, which deals with issues of integrity, anti-corruption, and that there was nothing untoward. Mr. Shivambu requested my office to investigate whether the President's statement that he had seen the contract between his son's company and AGO was true, and if the contract did exist. In his letter, Mr. Shivambu stated that the President had misled Parliament. Mr. Shivambu stated that the President told the National Assembly that his son's company had a contract with AGO for the provision of consultancy services, and the President went on to explicitly state that he saw the contract that his son signed, and the contract also deals with issues of integrity, anti-corruption, and there was nothing untoward. And there was also an anonymous complaint which we've received, or a whistleblower, an ordinary member of the public. And as you would know, that ordinary members of the public cannot lodge a complaint under this particular legislation, but as well, this whistleblower was also requesting the public protector to investigate this matter. I then consolidated all these three complaints into one complaint. In a nutshell, the complainants allege that the President breached the following provisions of the Constitution and the Executive Ethics Code. Section 96, 1 and 2 of the Constitution, which states that members of the Cabinet must act in accordance with the Code of Ethics prescribed by national legislation and may not act in any way that is inconsistent with their office or expose themselves to any situation involving the risk of a conflict between their official responsibilities and private interests. Paragraph 2, 1A to D of the Code, which states that members must fulfill all the obligations imposed upon them by the Constitution and law, act in good faith and in the best interests of good governance, and act in all respects in a manner that is consistent with the integrity of their office. Paragraph 2.3 of the Code further states that members of the executive may not willfully mislead the legislature to which they are accountable. And C, act in a way that is inconsistent with their position. D, use their position or any information entrusted to them to enrich themselves or improperly benefit any other person. And Section 3.1 of the Code of the Act, which provides that the public protector must investigate any alleged breach of the Code of Ethics on receipt of a complaint. Therefore, in this particular instance, it's obligatory for the public protector to investigate, and it was the complainant's contention that the President may have breached the code by exposing himself to any situation involving the risk of a conflict between their official responsibilities and their private interests, acted in a way that is inconsistent with their position, and used his position or any information entrusted to him to enrich himself or improperly benefit any other person. So the issues which we've considered and investigated, following a thorough analysis of the complaint and having taken into account the fact that the President was a member of the National Assembly at the time of the alleged event, I decided to narrow the investigation into the following three issues. Whether on 6 November 2018, during a question session in Parliament, the President deliberately misled the National Assembly and thereby acted in violation of the provisions of the Executive Ethics Code and the Code of Ethical Conduct and Disclosure of Members' Interests for the National Assembly and Permanent Council members. Whether the President improperly and in violation of the provisions of the Executive Code exposed himself to any situation involving the risk of a conflict between his official duties and his private interest, and used his position to enrich himself and his son through businesses owned by AGO. Whether there is an improper relationship between the President and his family on the one side and the company AGO on the other hand, which in fact, due to the nature of the 500,000 payment, passing through several intermediaries instead of a straightforward donation to the CR campaign, thus raising the suspicion of money laundering. The approach to the investigation is quite standard. We look at what happened, which is a blow-by-blow account of who did what, when, and so forth. We then look at what should have happened, which covers the standards that ought to have been upheld by the person alleged to have engaged in wrongdoing. These standards would include policies, laws, and the Constitution, amongst other prescripts. Once we have established what happened on the one side and what should have happened on the other, we bring the two versions together with a view to reconciling them. Ideally, the reconciliation should be seamless. A less than smooth reconciliation will suggest that some wrongdoing took place. At that point, we should proceed to make findings and come up with what, in the circumstances, would have been the appropriate remedial action. This approach was applied in this case as well. So the key information which we have was conducted by way of correspondence, interviews, and analysis of the relevant documentation, relevant laws, prescripts, as well as case law. In this regard, among nearly 30 key documents which I've relied on, letters from the President, Mr. Maimane, Mr. Shavambu, affidavits from Mr. Ninesh Desai from FNB, the affidavit from the interview of Mr. Fente of Mioto Trading, affidavit from Mr. Andile Ramaphosa, affidavit from Mr. Bejane Chauke, from Mr. James Mutlatsi of the CR17 campaign, from Ms. Donay Nicole, the President's advisor, a supplementary statement from the President, letters from Rushmir Notch and from the FIC. Also relied on advisory mandate between Blue Crane Capital and AGO, an anti-bribery and corruption policy between Blue Crane Capital and AGO, a legal opinion which we've received in this particular matter, letters from EFG attorneys and H&M attorneys, as well as the President's response to the Section 79 notice. I also relied from the evidence during the interview of Mr. Gavin Watson and all others who submitted their affidavits I've mentioned, as well from the EFG2 attorneys, which was Mr. Perry, Ms. Runel, all of whom gave their evidence under oath or affirmation. Lastly, I relied on information obtained during 2 meetings I had with the President. The prescripts I relied on in this matter is the Constitution, the Public Protector Act, the Executive Members Ethics Act, the Financial Intelligence Services Act, the Prevention and Corruption of Corrupt Activities Act, and the Executive Ethics Code. And some of the cases is the Mail-in Guardian, in fact, the Public Protector versus Mail-in Guardian, Supreme Court of Appeal judgment, the EFF versus the Speaker of the National Assembly judgment, which is a Constitutional Court judgment, and the Home Affairs, Minister of Home Affairs, and the Public Protector, which is a Supreme Court of Appeal judgment as well. So the investigation, at the commencement of the investigation, I notified the President and the Speaker of the National Assembly. By then it was Ms. Baleka Mbete, of the complaints received. And I also invited the President to respond to the allegations. I now deal with the question around whether on the 6th of November, during the question session in Parliament, the President deliberately misled the National Assembly and thereby acted in violation of the code and the legislation. It is not in dispute that during the question and answer session in Parliament on the 6th of November 2018, that the President responded to a question posed by Mr. Maimane regarding the alleged improper payment of 500,000 made by Agor to his son, Mr. Andile Ramaphosa. I inquired from the President why he felt compelled to respond to Mr. Maimane's question, as it was a follow-up, which was unrelated to the earlier question on VBS Bank and was not in line with the rules of the National Assembly. He indicated that he had felt the need to respond to what he believed was an attack on his integrity by Mr. Maimane, which happened in the heat of the moment, and he had to answer on his feet. On the 1st of February 2019, I received President Ramaphosa's response, and in this letter he asserted that both the allegation that he violated the Ethics Code by deliberately misleading the National Assembly in his reply to a question by Mr. Maimane, and that the available set of facts revealed that there was possibly an improper relationship existing between him and his family on the one side and the company Agor on the other were untrue, since they relied to a large extent on what he knew and when he knew it. He indicated that he had structured his statement in a manner that established the facts and the chronology of events as they relate to the information available to him. In as far as the allegation by Mr. Maimane of improper relationship existing between the President and his family on the one side and the President on the other side, the President stated that on the 5th of September 2018, he was informed by one of his advisors, Mr. Bejani Chauke, about a rumor that his son had received a payment of 500,000 from Agor. He indicated that on inquiring from his son, he was informed that in December 2017, the son's company, Blue Crane, signed an advisory mandate with Agor for possible business entry in some East African countries, and that in January 2018, his company signed an anti-bribery and corruption policy with Agor. President Ramaphosa stated that his son showed him copies of both advisory mandate and the anti-bribery and corruption policy. He further stated that it was on this occasion in September 2018 that he first became aware that his son's company had a business relationship with Agor. According to the President, from the way it was explained to him and based on the documentation, he had no reason to believe that there was anything untoward about the relationship. Regarding his parliamentary reply, the President indicated that on 6 November 2018, he appeared in the National Assembly to respond to questions for oral reply. He explained that in terms of the National Assembly, he is expected to appear once a quarter to reply to questions submitted by MPs. So the 6 questions are received in advance. Replies are prepared. Once the President has responded to a question, the MP that asked the question has an opportunity for a follow-up question. He indicated that on the occasion concerned, the question was from Mr. Maimane about VBS Mutual Bank. In his follow-up question, Mr. Maimane referred to a payment that he allegedly that was made by Agor to his son, Mr. Andile Ramaphosa. The President said that he assumed that the payment to which Mr. Maimane was referring to related to this to the advisory mandate that he had been signed by the son and Agor, and that this was based on what he was told by the son 2 months earlier. He stated that his main reply to Mr. Maimane's supplementary question was based on information that he had at the time. And the President also stated upon returning to his office in 10 days following the question session, he was informed by one of his advisors, Ms. Nicole, that the account that Mr. Maimane had referred to, EFG2, was an attorney's trust account that had been used by CR17 campaign to raise funds for the campaign to advocate for his election as president of the ANC. According to the president, a deliberate decision had been taken by himself and those leading the campaign that he would not involve himself in the fundraising, even as he would address meetings and a few dinners with potential donors or potential funders. These meetings and dinners where potential funders were invited would outline the vision of the ANC and the country. They had also decided that he would not be provided with the identity of donors or the amount they have pledged, as he did not feel under obligation to them in any shape or form. The president further stated that he was therefore not aware at the time that he appeared at the National Assembly that Mr. Gavin Watson had made a donation to the CR17 campaign. He stated that his immediate response was that this information should be disclosed and that his reply in the National Assembly should be corrected. According to the president, at a meeting with his advisors, they confirmed that a payment of 500,000 was received on behalf of Mr. Gavin Watson into their CR17 Attorney's Trust account, and that this donation was distinct from and unrelated to the business relationship between his son's company and AGO. Upon hearing all this information, the president stated that he decided to write to the Speaker of the National Assembly and inform him of this inadvertently provided information. He directed his staff to make public his explanation to the Speaker in a media release. He further requested that former managers of CR17 campaign, Mr. Bejan, Mr. Mutlatsi, also prepare a statement in which they clarify the nature and circumstances in which the payment was made. The president also indicated that he has since been informed that CR17 are campaign managers that after an unsuccessful attempt to meet with Mr. Gavin Watson in order to arrange for the return of the donation, an amount of 500,000 has been transferred into the attorney's trust account until such time these matters surrounding AGO are clarified following various concerns which were disclosed at the Zondo Commission of Inquiry into state capture. Thereafter, a decision will be made as to whether these monies should be returned to the account where they came from, passed on to appropriate government authorities, or donated to charity. President Ramaphosa asserted that he did not deliberately mislead Parliament and that during the time of his reply in the National Assembly, he was not aware that a payment was made on behalf of Mr. Gavin Watson. The president asserted that there was no improper relationship between him and his family on the one hand and AGO and others on the other side. He was neither aware of nor involved at the conclusion of this advisory mandate between his son and global operation. Concluding his submission to my office, the president reiterated the message that he conveyed in the National Assembly that he has discouraged his sons or his family or his children from conducting business with government or with any state-owned entity. In this regard, he had told them that if he became aware of any illegality or corruption in their business activities, he will be the first one to report them to the authorities. I'll refer to the case Public Protector versus Mail and Guardian, where the Supreme Court of Appeal held that the Public Protector is not a passive adjudicator between the citizen and the state, relying only upon evidence which is placed before her by the parties. The court held further that the Public Protector should not be bound or limited to the issues raised for consideration and determination by the parties, but should investigate further and discover the truth and also inspire confidence that the truth had been discovered. And the court made it clear that the mandate of the Public Protector is an investigatory one, requiring action in appropriate circumstances. Although the Public Protector may act upon a complaint which has been received or made or initiate their own complaint, but then if there's more information that is before her, especially the knowledge of maladministration, impropriety in public life, the Public Protector should investigate. According to Rule 140 of the National Assembly, 2016 questions to the President must be submitted to the Speaker 16 days before. So now I'm dealing with the rules where the President should have not allowed Mr. Maimane to make a different follow-up question, because the questions here were relating to VBS and Mutual Bank, whereas the question which was asked by Mr. Maimane as a follow-up related to the issue of AGO. President Ramaphosa's heat of the moment response is of concern because I believe that parliamentary questions are an important means used by members of parliament to ensure that government is accountable to parliament for its policies and actions, and through the parliament to the people. Therefore, President's provocation by the question from the leader of the opposition cannot justify giving poorly prepared answers and creating a risk of misleading Parliament as it did in this case. The South African law is silent on whether cabinet members or presidents may amend or make corrections to statements made in their oral reply to Parliament. This is a grey area which calls for Parliament's attention. It is therefore goes without saying that although President Ramaphosa may have justified to correct the earlier statement he had made on erroneous or incomplete information at his disposal, he did mislead Parliament. In the absence of such explicit rules dealing with such corrections or amendments, regard must be had to Section 2.3 of the Executive Ethics Code, which states that members may not deliberately or inadvertently mislead the President or the Premier, or as the case may be, the legislature. In the Constitutional Court judgment between AFF and the Speaker of the National Assembly, the question regarding the President's obligation was exhaustively dealt with as follows by the Chief Justice Mogoeng. He said the President is the head of state and the head of national executive. His is indeed the highest calling to the highest office in the land. He is the first citizen of this country and occupies a position indispensable for the effective governance of our democratic country. Only upon him has the constitutional obligation to uphold, defend, and respect the Constitution. He is the constitutional being by design, a national pathfinder, a quintessential commander-in-chief of state affairs, and the personification of this nation's constitutional project. It is worth noting that the President, in responding to Mr. Maimane's question, did so to a question that did not meet any of the above rules or criteria. As the original question asked by Mr. Maimane, as I said, related to VBS and not AGO. According to evidence provided to my office, Mr. Chauke had already 2 months ago, after hearing the rumors, informed the President about the allegations that the money was paid to Andile Ramaphosa. I therefore submit that nothing stopped the President from objecting to the question and even to make a request to the Speaker to be allowed in terms of the rules to go and prepare a well-researched response. As indicated above, the statement made by the President in his reply to the question, albeit defective in terms of the rules, was misleading, as he also considered in the correspondence which he wrote subsequently to the Speaker. to correct his reply. Consequently, the President's reply was in breach of the provisions of paragraph 2.3a of the Executive Code, the standard of which includes deliberate and inadvertent misleading of the legislature. He inadvertently and or deliberately misled Parliament in that he should have allowed himself sufficient time to consider the question and make a well-informed response. President Ramaphosa, as the head of state and the epitome of the Constitution, should have acted with restraint and not allow Mr. Maimane's question to affect his demeanor, as he had stated in his response, that he had felt attacked and had to defend himself and his family. His conduct was inconsistent with his office as a member of cabinet and therefore in violation of Section 96(1) of the Constitution as referred to above. I now turn to the question whether the President improperly and in violation of the Constitution and the Code exposed himself to any situation involving the risk of a conflict between his official duties and his private interest. It is common cause that the payment of 500,000 was made by AGO into EFG2 trust account towards the CR17 campaign. In October 2017, during the President Ramaphosa's election campaign, it is also not in dispute that the President's son had business contracts with AGO for which he was paid large sums of money for the services he rendered. The issue for my determination is whether or not the President, as the then Deputy President and Member of Parliament, was duty-bound to declare the financial benefit accruing to him during the campaign, and whether his failure to disclose such financial benefit was in violation of the Executive Members' Ethics Act Code. On 11 March 2019, President Ramaphosa submitted a supplementary statement to my office, which ostensibly setting out or clarifying issues of conflict of interest and the obligation of members of the National Assembly to disclose financial interest received in their private capacities as members of political parties, as opposed to such gifts and donations received while performing their official responsibilities. The President stated that during a discussion between me and him regarding this 500,000 donation that was paid by AGO into a law firm ABSA trust account towards his campaign, I seemed to suggest that the donation amounted to a benefit and that it ought to have been disclosed. He indicated that he became a member of Parliament in May 2014, and thereafter he was appointed Deputy President of the country. In that capacity, he said he disclosed interests as required by the Executive Ethics Code every year. He said further that he continued to do so since his election as President in February 2018. In so doing, and based on the provisions of the Code, he said he disclosed his share and financial interest in companies and other corporate entities, sponsorships, gifts, and other hospitality benefits of a material nature, foreign travel, land, and immovable property inside or outside South Africa, and pensions. He indicated further that he was aware of his duty to disclose such information in relation to his spouse and his dependent children, to the extent that he was aware of them. In fact, he was aware of what needed to be disclosed. He said that his son was not dependent upon him for financial support. He said he therefore was not obliged to disclose any of his financial interest in terms of the Code. The President indicated that since becoming the Member of Parliament and member of the Executive, which requires for the President to publish a code of ethics prescribing standards and rules which members must comply with, he has also performed accordingly. He referred to the Executive Ethics Code, where it states that the members should or must comply, or he complied per this Executive Code. He submitted that the provisions indicated that the target of the Executive Ethics Act was to regulate members in their performance of their official responsibilities and not internal political party election donations. The President further quoted Section 22C of the Act, which further states that the code published must require members to disclose any financial interest acquired after the assumption of office, including any gifts, sponsored, foreign, and everything, or their families. And he's indicating that he did disclose. And he made the following disclosures: financial interests. He also disclosed the benefits of any nature which he received and any donations. The President submitted that the donation was not in return for any benefit received by him in his official capacity, nor was it in order to influence him in the performance of his duties. He said the donation was instead received to support an internal political party election. In the President's view, there is a distinction between donations made towards a campaign fund for a political party's elective conference and gifts and benefits received by members in their official capacity or in an attempt to influence the member in the performance of their duties. The latter two instances would reasonably be subject to disclosure and/or prohibition. He contended that it could never have been the intention of the legislature to regulate donor funding for internal political party elections. According to him, it was clearly the intention of the legislature to regulate the provision of gifts and benefits to members in return for a benefit received by a member in their official capacity, or in an attempt to influence the member in the performance of the member's duties. He indicated that the donation related to an internal party political, as I've indicated above. The President indicated that currently in law there was no obligation in South Africa for members to disclose their sources of private funding for an internal political party election, and it would be unreasonable and irrational to prohibit or require that he disclose such donations. Simply put, it cannot be that every person who may also be a member contesting an internal political party election will be expected to disclose their donors. That's what the President argued. He further indicated that he was not aware of any person in any political party who was also a member who received a donation towards their campaign in an internal party election being obliged to make public or disclose the list of donors that contributed to their campaign. He referred to Section 22 of the Executive Ethics Act, which states that the disclosure of a benefit is required, firstly, if it is a material benefit, and secondly, if it is received by the member. Although the donation may be regarded as material in nature, the President said it was not received by him. Instead, it was received by the CR17 campaign in strict confidence. President Ramaphosa also stated that he had no knowledge of the donation and therefore could not reasonably be expected to have disclosed it when it was made. In the light of this, he submitted that paragraph 4.1 of the Code of Ethics only prohibits the solicitation or acceptance of a gift or benefit which is in return for any benefit received by a member in their official capacity, or constitute improper influence on the member or constitutes an attempt to influence the member. He added that in such circumstances, it was appropriate to either require the disclosure of an offer of such benefit or to prohibit the solicitation. However, he indicated that the donation was neither offered, solicited, nor accepted by him for any of the above reasons. The President added that although the donation was made, may be material, so as I've indicated above, that it was not donated to him. Based on this argument, the President stated that he did not believe that he had acted or he had failed in his duties to disclose. Section 196, in fact, Section 96, 1 and 2 of the Constitution, as I've indicated above, states that members of the Cabinet must act in accordance with the Code of Ethics prescribed by national legislation and may not act in any way that is inconsistent with their office or expose themselves to any situation involving the risk of a conflict between their official responsibilities and private interests. In the Constitutional Court case between the EFF and the Speaker and the DA, it was very clear that the President knowingly or unwittingly exposed himself to a situation involving a risk, the risk of a conflict between his official responsibilities and private interest was exhaustively dealt with. In the matter that gave rise to that court case, the Nkandla investigation, the public protector's finding on the violation of Section 96 was based on the self-evident reality that the features identified and unrelated to the security of the President checked against the list of what the South African police security experts themselves determined to be security features were installed because the people involved knew they were dealing with the President. When some government functionaries find themselves in that position, the inclination to want to please higher authority by doing more than is reasonably required or legally permissible or to accede to a gentle nudge by overzealous and ambitious senior officials to do a little wrong here and there may be irresistible. However, the person in the position of the President should be alive to this reality and guard against its occurrence. Failure to do this may constitute an infringement of this provision. To find oneself on the wrong side of Section 96, all that needs to be proven is a risk. It does not even have to materialize. There is a touchstone report which we have issued in state and party bloodlines. It's a 2015-16 report which I've used as a touchstone in this matter. And the issue entirely was about conflation of party political activities and the state events, where sometimes members would be regarded or purported to have acted in their personal capacities and therefore violating the executive ethics code due to blurred lines between their responsibilities in the circumstances where the state and party roles tend to overlap. Deriving from the above legal prescripts and case law, it can be safely argued that the campaign pledges towards the CR17 campaign were some form of sponsorship, and that they were direct financial sponsorship or assistance from non-party sources other than a family member or permanent companion, and were therefore benefits of a material nature. President's failure to disclose the said material benefits, including a donation from AGO, constitute the breach of the code. President Ramaphosa received assistance from any source other than the member's party which benefit the member in his or personal and private capacity, because as a presidential candidate of the ANC, he received campaign contributions which benefited him in his personal capacity. Being the deputy president of the country and a member of parliament at the time, President Ramaphosa was therefore duty-bound to declare financial benefits accruing to him from the campaign activities. It cannot also be argued that the financial benefits did not accrue to President personally, merely because it was deposited into a trust account of CR17. I have evidence which indicates that some of the money collected through the CR17 campaign account was transferred into Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation account. I have also established that the President hosted several dinners where he participated himself and addressed the donors. Therefore, in my view, that is actively participating. Further, I have evidence which confirms regular updates to President Ramaphosa on the operations of the CR17 by the campaign managers, his directives to them about payments of the money into the CR Foundation, as well as being asked by the campaign managers to speak to certain donors. Consequently, political parties are under no express legal obligation to disclose the sources of their private funding at elections or any other time. However, on the contrary, different consideration applies when it comes to individual political party members who may be members of parliament and cabinet ministers at the same time, and who in their private capacity obtain sponsorship, solicit gift in whatever disguise form, or obtain any other benefit of a material nature to aid them in their competition for party leadership positions. Therefore, they cannot to seek a refuge behind the party political activity label, as they should comply with the applicable ethical codes of conduct governing their conduct as members of parliament or the executive. Section 96 of the Constitution requires cabinet members to act in accordance with the code, and that they should refrain from acting in a way which is inconsistent with their office or exposing themselves to situations involving the risk of a conflict between their official responsibilities and private interest. Based on the aforesaid, it is therefore my view that even private activity or interest may cause cabinet members to violate the provisions of the Executive Members Ethics Act. Further, a person in the position of the Deputy President, as the President was then, is required by the standards of ethical conduct set by the provisions of Section 96 of the Constitution and the Code to have been concerned about the obvious extravagant and expensive donation into a trust account that was used to raise funds for his benefit. In any reasonable person's opinion, it is expected of the President to have interrogated the sources of these donations. Although I have been informed by the CR17 campaign managers that the deliberate concealment of the identity of the donors and the amounts donated by them from the President was to avoid creating the perception that his goodwill will be bought, the primary reason, in my view, should have been to avoid any situation of capture of the President that might compromise his decision-making in the future. Instead, the President just tacitly accepted these donations, amongst which there was this solicited donation of 500,000 by Mr. Gavin Watson, the owner of AGO, the company that had a contract with the Department of Correctional Services. No matter how one looks at the issue, a conclusion that direct sponsorship of one's political campaign for political party leadership does qualify as a declarable sponsorship, and that is inescapable. President Ramaphosa's failure to disclose financial interest which accrued to him as a result of these donations accordingly amounts to a conduct that is inconsistent with the office as a member of cabinet and violates Section 96 of the Constitution. The last question that I wish to deal with is whether there is an improper relationship between President Ramaphosa and family on one side and AGO, and the nature of the payment of this 500,000 passing through several intermediaries instead of a straightforward donation to the CR17 campaign, thus raising suspicion of money laundering. This is the last issue I will deal with. It is not in dispute that this money was paid. I've taken you through into the EFG2 account. This EFG2 account was the trust account of the attorneys, which was receiving donations for the CR17 campaign. And Mr. Pete Venter confirmed that he was told or instructed by Mr. Gavin Watson to pay this 500,000 into, in fact, to approach his PA, Ms. Natasha Oliver, to pay an amount of 3 million actually into this Mioto Trading. Mr. Venter is one of the directors of Mioto Trading. So Mr. Mioto received this 3 million, but was told that there is a 500,000 which must be paid into an account belonging to the president's son. That's what he said he was told. And this 3 million was deposited, 500,000 was paid into this EFG2 account. The 2.5 million was then supposed to be deposited into another account. The president indicated that he was not involved in the fundraising process, and this was the campaign which was led or directed by the campaign manager, and also repeating, or we've used the same information that he indicated that he told them he doesn't want to be involved in the whole process. According to the president, at the meeting, the advisors told him that this EFG2 was the one which donated to the CR17 account. My investigation team prepared subpoenas to the key witnesses or role players. As I've indicated, I had 2 meetings with the president. I interviewed Ms. Nicole, I interviewed Mr. Mutlatsi, Mr. Chauke. I received an affidavit from Andile Ramaphosa, the 2 banks involved in the transactions, FNB and ABSA, an affidavit of Mr. Venter, which also interviewed. I interviewed Mr. Watson. So the interviews which are conducted with Mr. Mutlatsi, one of the 2 CR17 campaign managers who submitted an affidavit, indicated that he was one of the members of the fundraising committee, along with Mr. Benjamin Chauke and Nicole. According to him, they had decided early in 2017 to approach donors for the CR17 with a clear condition that the donors should not expect any favors in return for their contributions to the CR17 campaign. There was also a conscious decision by the committee members, as well as agreement with the President Ramaphosa, that he should not know the identities of the donors. And the members, in fact, as the members of the committee, they decided to come up with the names of possible donors whom they decided to approach in their individual capacity and not as directors or owners of businesses. Mr. Mutlatsi indicated that he is the one who approached Mr. Gavin Watson, and he knew him for more than 20 years, and he even approached him and requested him to donate to the CR17, and he consequently gave the business card of Nicole, so that the money, they can speak to Nicole, since she was the one who was managing the finances, to deposit the money. Mr. Mutlatsi indicated that a decision had also been taken by them not to do anything in writing, therefore no records or documentation such as project plan, minutes of meetings were kept for the CR17 campaign. According to him, Mr. Chauke, Bejari Chauke, was the overall leader of the CR17 campaign, whilst Ms. Nicole was the facilitator of things for the campaign. Mr. Mutlatsi indicated that he had been responsible for approaching Mr. Watson for the donation, and Mr. Mutlatsi further indicated that he knew Mr. Ramaphosa from their days as members of National Union of Mine Workers. President Ramaphosa was also present at some of the dinners which had been organized by the CR17 campaign managers for the donors, where he would address them and he would naturally meet and greet the benefactors. Mr. Motlatsi also indicated that during their fundraising drive, they had raised more than 200 million for the CR17 campaign. I also conducted an interview with Mr. Chauke, one of the campaign managers. He had his legal representatives. In fact, all of them had legal representatives assisting them, not representing them, as he had submitted a sworn affidavit. This was then followed by questions and clarity, and Mr. Chauke confirmed that he was one who alerted the president about the rumor that was going around about the 500,000 payment by Agor to Mr. Andile Ramaphosa. This was in September 2018, 2 months before the matter was raised by Mr. Maimane in Parliament. Mr. Chauke stated that he was part of the campaign committee in which he was playing an oversight role, but that there was also a fundraising committee which comprised other members, including Ms. Nicole, Mr. Motlatsi, who was the leader of the committee. He indicated that he played no role in finances of the campaign, except when he was requesting funding for accommodation, food, and other logistics for the local, provincial, and national branch coordinators, and therefore was unable to talk on the finances or on the issue. Mr. Chauke was also unable to shed sufficient light into the issues to assist the focus of the investigation, nor provide any clarity, especially because he indicated that they kept no records as well of the activities. According to him, even minutes of the meetings for the campaign were not recorded as they did not deem it necessary, thus echoing Mr. Motlatsi's sentiments. It is worth mentioning that Mr. Chauke was not helpful at all to my office. He alleged that he worked with branches both locally and provincially, but when requested to shed light into specific processes and procedures relating to accessing funds by this, he could not. Although he shared the structure of the team on how they were constituted, he elected not to respond to some of the questions despite having been mentioned earlier by Mr. Motlatsi. Then I interviewed Ms. Nicole, who is the advisor to President Ramaphosa and had been mentioned particularly by the two. She was also assisted by her legal representatives. According to her affidavit, which she took us through, and she did confirm that there was a 500,000 donation for the CR17, which was paid by from Mr. Gavin Watson's account. She also confirmed what the other fundraisers to have indicated. For instance, the precondition made to donors that they should not expect any favors when they contribute to the campaign, and that they will, as well as the not disclosing the identities of the donors to the president. Ms. Nicole confirmed that the president stated that she had been the one who alerted him to the inaccuracy of his response to Parliament and corrected him that this EFG2 trust account belonged to their attorneys. Ms. Nicole stated that she knew President Ramaphosa for quite some time. In fact, they worked together at Chanduga, and then she also indicated that she's one who approached the president about the idea of asking for donations for his campaign. Ms. Nicole also indicated that it was agreed that the identity of the donors and amounts pledged should not be revealed to the president, contrary to the evidence which I have in my possession. However, she was unable to sufficiently address a concern I raised about the pre-screening or vetting of donors for purposes of eliminating the ones who might be tainted, such as Agor, or who would negatively affect the campaign as well as the integrity of the president. Ms. Nicole also confirmed that Mr. Motlatsi indicated that during the interview that they might have collected around 200 million. Notwithstanding the unanimous statements by the CR17 campaign, to me that it had been agreed that identities of donors and amounts should not be disclosed to the president, evidence adduced has revealed the contrary. Evidence in my possession in the form of emails, invitations, instruction to confirm that the president was constantly informed of the activities of the CR17 campaign by the campaign managers, whereupon his advice and approval to specific matters would from time to time be sought. I have therefore established that in addition to having met with the potential donors during the banquet function, where he delivered keynote addresses, evidence further confirmed that the President had further and broader interactions with the donors, some of whom he knew very well. Although I did not conduct interviews with Mr. Andile Ramaphosa, he made submission to my office in the form of an affidavit in which he explained his relationship with AGO. This was confirmed by the advisory mandate and the anti-bribery and corruption policy. Mr. Shivamboni's complaint had made a specific request to me to investigate and confirm whether indeed there was a contract between Mr. Andile Ramaphosa's company, Blue Crane Capital, and AGO as indicated by the President in his response. Mr. Andile Ramaphosa also submitted bank records which showed transactions of monies paid by AGO into Blue Crane for the services rendered. He also denied having a trust foundation linked to the account which had received the 500,000, which was paid by AGO through Miyoto Trading. He also submitted invoices generated and in respect of services which have been rendered. According to bank statement provided to my office by Mr. Ramaphosa, which he received about 4 monthly payments of 171,000, which in total was around 684,000 from AGO for the period mentioned above. I then interviewed Mr. Fenter, whose affidavit was primarily the source of this investigation. I then also interviewed Mr. Watson and Natasha Olivier, who was AGO's private secretary. Mr. Fenter indicated that he was working as a tax consultant in 2017 for AGO. He was called by Mr. Watson to his office. Upon his arrival, was then taken to Ms. Olifier's office, who is AGO's company secretary. Mr. Olivier was instructed by Mr. Watson to transfer 3 million into the account of Miyoto Trading, a small company which belonged to Mr. Fenter and his sister. Mr. Fenter was then handed a piece of paper with banking details, where Mr. Watson was instructed him to transfer 500,000 to an EFG2 trust account, which he was told was the trust foundation account of Mr. Andile Ramaphosa. He was informed by Mr. Watson that the description of the transfer of 500,000 should be social development, and he did as he was instructed. Mr. Watson had also instructed him to transfer 2.5 million into the account of Misleading, which he did on 19 October 2017. But he informed me that the transaction was, however, cancelled, and this money was transferred back later, this 2.5, which was given to Lindehouse. Apparently, for some reason, or some unknown reason to him, the matter, this Ms. Lindehouse was no longer willing to receive this money. According to him, the affidavit referred to by Mr. Maimane in his complaint was prepared on his behalf, and that certain parts of what is reflected in it is not all true, and certain things that have been changed. However, everything pertaining to the 500,000 is true. Mr. Fenter stated that, in fact, he had signed the affidavit referred to under duress. Mr. Fenter further indicated that Mr. Watson and AGO took advantage of his small company to effect some of their financial transactions, and that he was unable to refuse, hence the instruction to him to transfer the 500,000 instead of using their own accounts. During my interview with Mr. Gavin Watson, he admitted that he donated an amount of 500,000 towards the CR17 campaign after having been approached by Mr. Mutlatsi to do so. According to him, there was nothing untoward with his donation as a long-standing member of the ANC for more than 40 years, and he used to contribute financially to the ANC party elections campaign, even during the former other presidents. before President Ramaphosa. However, Mr. Watson also stated that in the past he had donated to the ANC as a party and not to individuals, as it was the case now, where he had to donate to both CR17 and NDZ individual campaigns. Also to express a concern to me that he thinks that this was a politically motivated attack on him by the opposition party. Mr. Watson confirmed, although he did not attend all the dinner functions organized by the campaign managers, he was present at one which was hosted by the president. From the bank records at my disposal, there had been several constant transfers of money between AGO, Concilium, and Mioto Trading, amounting to large sums and over a period of time. I also proceeded to interview the PA to Mr. Watson, who confirmed the transfer of 3 million and out of that, the 500,000 into EFG2 account. And I also interviewed the 3 directors of attorneys, the firm of attorneys, Edelstein, Faber, and Krobler, in order to get more information on how they administered the EFG2 trust account of the CR17 campaign. They were also assisted by their legal representatives during the proceedings. So, one of the directors, Mr. Berry, who is a former director of EFG2, stated that he had been approached by CR17 campaign managers, in particular Ms. Nicole, to open a trust account dedicated to the campaign, which he did in compliance with all legal requirements. According to him, it was with a specific mandate and clear forward instruction on how the account will operate. Subsequent to verifying their bank and their audit with the bank and their auditors, Levin Howard, EFG was given a go-ahead to open the account for CR17. He then indicated that although Ms. Ronelle Krobler, one of the directors, was not involved in the physical opening of the account, she dealt with the transfer of funds to beneficiaries on instructions from CR17 campaign managers, mostly Ms. Nicole. However, the bank records reflect her as one of the signatories of the bank mandate when the account was opened. Ms. Krobler, on her account of what transpired, confirmed that what had been said by Mr. Berry, and that she would get telephonic instructions from Nicole to pay X, Y, and Z company. In conclusion, the EFG directors indicated that the account was always audited and the balance sheet was sent to the Law Society. I need to mention that the advocate who was helping them was quite uncooperative, as he was from the onset raising unnecessary objections, which he continued to do throughout the proceedings, whereas we wanted just to get assistance from the EFG2. Evidence of disbursements of funds from EFG2 trust account to several beneficiaries, including Riatenda Trust, Linked Environmental Services, and Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation. I had also subpoenaed bank records of EFG2 accounts, 2 bank accounts involved in the above transaction, to establish how the alleged trajectory of the money occurred, so as to determine whether such movement was not improper as alleged by the complainant, that there was suspicious movement of money and suspicion of money laundering. From the evidence received by my office, I can confirm that 500,000 payment was transferred from Watson's personal account as part of a lump sum of 3 million into the account of Mioto Trading and eventually into EFG2 trust account, which is an attorney's trust account of CR17. I can also confirm that large sums of money were transferred by various benefactors into the EFG2 trust account for the CR17 campaign, from where it was dispersed by the attorneys to several beneficiaries. I've named just a few: Riatenda Trust, Linked Environment Services, and Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation, but there's there's a number of other beneficiaries who were paid. From the evidence received by my office, an amount of more than 191,482,000 was deposited into the EFG2 trust account between 6 December 2016 to 1 January 2017, and during the same period, this amount was transferred out of this account. Another bank account, there's an amount of 388 million, which was deposited into this reattender trust between 1 January 2017 to 20 February 2019, whilst nearly the same amount, 388,518,000, was transferred out of the same this account. Another information is that an amount of 441,179,000 was deposited into FNB account of Linked Environmental Services between 15 December 2016 to 13 February, and during the same period, this amount was paid to several beneficiaries. About 335,000 rands was transferred from Linked Environmental Services into the Cyril Ramaphosa Foundation, and some of the monies which were paid out of all the donations received for the campaign, records reflect that there were 3 single largest donations of 30 million on 9 March 2017, more than 39 million September 2017, and over 51 million on the same date into the EFG2 ABSA Trust account. I must indicate that we've subpoenaed the records from ABSA, but they never cooperated, but we had to get the records. In conclusion, on the above revelations relating to exchanges of large sums of money, some of which received from private companies, I wish to express my preliminary view that such a scenario, when looked at carefully, creates a situation of the risk of some sort of state capture, state of capture by those donating these monies to the campaign. Section 12 of the Prevention and Combating of Corruption Activities Act provides that any person who directly or indirectly accepts or agrees or offers to accept any gratification from any person, whether for the benefit of himself or herself, or for the benefit of that other person, or gives or agrees to give to any other person gratification in order to improperly influence in any way the promotion, execution, procurement of contract with a public body, private organization, corporate body, or any organization, the fixing of the price, consideration of other monies as provided, is guilty of an offense. Section 3 of PACA also provides for an all-encompassing general offense of corruption. In terms of this section, anybody who accepts any gratification from anybody else or gives any gratification to anybody else to influence the receiver to conduct himself or herself in a way which amounts to the unlawful exercise of any duties, commits the act of corruption. PACA also criminalizes specific corrupt activities relating to, amongst others, public officers, contracts, and procurement of tenders. It also recognizes the link between corrupt activities and other forms of crime, such as organized crime and financial crimes, including money laundering. For instance, a criminal may attempt to integrate the funds he or she received from corrupt activity, such as a bribe or kickback, into a financial system by channeling funds through complex financial transactions, during which he or she may involve several entities as conduits and use financial institutions as a means to disguise the corrupt source of funds, as well as the ultimate beneficial owner of the proceeds of unlawful activity. My investigation into the issue pertaining to the possible money laundering is premised on the above legislation dealing with corruption, and not only applies not only to private individuals who offer bribe, but also to private individuals who accept bribes. So there's a corruptor and a corruptee. It would therefore have been remiss of me not to deal with the aspects of the complaint so as to be able to confirm or dispel with such suspicion as referred to in the allegations brought before me by the complainants. Section 64C(1) of the Public Protector Act provides that the Public Protector may at any time prior to, during or after the investigation, if he or she is of the opinion that the facts disclose a commission of an offense by any person, bring the matter to the notice of the relevant authority charged with prosecutions. Based on the facts before me as well as evidence adduced during my investigation, I have come to the conclusion that there is a merit to the allegation relating to the